Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to be in front of you to further discuss some of the water ideas that have already been presented to you. My name is Andy Komor. I'm actually a national NCEES water engineer. I'm not licensed in the state of Minnesota yet. The May board meeting is supposed to change that. I'm currently licensed in California, Louisiana, and Oregon, and we practice both nationally and internationally. I grew up in Minneapolis, just outside of Minneapolis. I was a park board employee for 7 years, gross, in Columbia. I graduated cum laude from the University of Minnesota Civil Engineering, actually with Commissioner Abene. Did natural wetlands research there. Went to Arizona State and did wetlands research on a large 70-acre project there. And I've been very fortunate to be involved in water. Water is such a cool field to be in. And for 20 years, I practiced at a company called PACE in Southern California. And we've worked on dozens of comparable projects. In front of you here on the lower left is the award-winning Irvin Magic Johnson Park. It's a stormwater capture, large lake system. In the center there is the Wilds Golf Course. It's a project that we've done in Minnesota. And on the right there is an example of another golf course flood project. And there are several of them in the California Delta area. Up in the Delta area, you have high groundwater, low flat elevation. I tell people every time I go to Sacramento and I'm driving around there that it feels like home, because it does feel like Minneapolis. And that's where a majority of my work is located in our work. And PACE's motto is advanced water engineering in partnership with nature. So if it's not right for the client and it's not right for nature, we don't do it. And in this case, maybe one of the criticisms of one of the early concepts we had was that it wasn't natural enough. We pivoted off there, and we're really excited to show you what I call Alternative 6 tonight. Alternatives 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 were developed by Barr. Barr did an amazing job coming up with lots of documentation and great data research and 5 good ideas. This just happens to be a 6th idea that we'd like you to consider. And in that idea, it opens up more available dry land. Do what you want with that land. You guys are the park board, but it doesn't seem to make 100% sense to maybe flood land when you could use it for other purposes. And we've got plenty of wetlands and water to share with you tonight. So just real quick description of what's going out there for a lot of people in the audience. I understand the commissioners understand this very well. But if you can see my cursor here, here's your 50-acre Lake Hiawatha. Minnehaha Creek is flowing all the time, comes in from Lake Minnetonka's dam, and it has a constant flow of water into the lake, has a stopover like a train station, and then it heads out to the Mississippi River. North side, you've got flows coming in off of the urban watersheds that flow directly into the lake where they stop over. And then there's flows that come into the golf course ponds, and they're actually pumped up and over the berm into the lake, and they go down to the Mississippi. So there's 3 main sources in, 1 source out, and there's a berm on the edge at elevation 815.5. So that means there's about 2.5, 3.5 feet of freeboard on that shoreline. I happened to be out there last night, and that's about exactly what it looked like. So over time, with more development, more urbanization, there's just happens to be more flow. You could also argue, global warming or not, that there's more rainfall as well. And so more flows coming down Minnehaha, more flows coming off the urban watersheds, and the lakes have to operate higher. And what I mean by lakes, both Hiawatha does, and to the south, Lake Nokomis does as well. Because if you released more water from Nokomis, it would actually pile up Hiawatha higher. And it's funny because Nokomis is actually just a little bit higher than Hiawatha, and there's a chance to maybe connect the 2 things together, as Tom Oslin had said, and sort of have a 2-for-1 benefit by what we're going to show you tonight. And then one of the park board's main goals I hear over and over from a lot of you is we need to reduce the amount of groundwater pumping because, as I showed in the earlier YouTube presentation, Minnehaha Creek comes down, it ends up in the lake, it leaks down into the area underneath the golf course, it mounds, we pump it up to the lake, it leaks back down. We pump it up to the lake, and so that just pumps in a circle, and that's the $5,000 a year or so in electricity costs to pump that water back up and keep the golf course and the residents dry currently. So why can't we get more water out of Hiawatha and just solve that problem easily? As Barr pointed out, this is a figure from their report. Here is a profile of the ground at the bottom of Minnehaha Creek downstream of Hiawatha on the way to the Mississippi River. And water at Lake Hiawatha is at about elevation 812. And as it wants to flow out by gravity, it runs into restrictions at 28th, 30th, and further downstream. And so in order to solve that problem, the city of Minneapolis would have to go in and remove large sewer tunnels and gas lines and things like that that are pretty much infeasible. And so the master plan rightfully pointed out that long term, the only way out of this mess is to raise the water surface. So we got to raise it in Hiawatha, we got to raise it all over the place in order to drive this water out. And I fundamentally agree with that. But when I read the Star Tribune article 7 or 8 weeks ago, and I'm just a volunteer for 7 weeks on the job, if you will, I thought to myself, if you're going to solve a flood problem, why would you pile more water up? And that's kind of what alternatives 1 through 5 do. They store the water on the golf course. And so here's the lake over here on the right. The water would then pile up the way it's supposed to, but then it would back water on top of the golf course, so it would be seasonally flooded when flows come in, and it would be permanently wet on a large majority of the land. And I'll show you a plan view here in a minute. So that causes more basement intrusion in the surrounding properties. There's some houses on the northwest corner that are very low, and they rely on that pumping to prevent flooded basements. But more importantly, when water comes down, it's coming down heavier and heavier every year. It used to be 300 cubic feet per second, then it went to 400, then it went to 500. A lot of water's coming down. We need a place to put that water. So, as I said before, 5 alternatives from the Barr report. I just chose arbitrarily alternative 4, and that's what's shown here in front of you. And as I said before, the solution, if you don't look at the black arrows that I drew here, was essentially bring the water in from the northwest, store it on the golf course lands, and then they had proposed actually an open channel, a new opened creek, if you will, to put some of the flows into the lake. And then you have Minnehaha flows doing what they do, which is to go through the lake and out. So those were alternatives 1 through 5 in a nutshell. But what if we considered alternative 6, which was keep that open channel on the upper north part of the golf course, just like was shown in the Barr report. But the flows coming in here in the northwest, the low point, instead of sending them into the course and flooding the course, why not send it up to that same creek, bring that around, and then when it gets to the lake, just don't put it in the lake. So just go clockwise around like this, go counterclockwise around like this, and shoot it out of there. And I had previously suggested to pull Lake Hiawatha level down to give the park board more land. But as I talked to a lot of you, that was a terrible idea. And so now I'm proposing, let's leave Lake Hiawatha alone. So, and it's operated over the years between elevation 810 and 813. Let's leave it at 810. That's a nice elevation. It keeps everybody dry, all the neighborhoods dry. And accordingly, this is what the concept looks like. So I'm going to spend just a second on this slide here if you want to take your time and stare at this. But essentially, a new naturalized creek would go counterclockwise along the north side, and that would operate and flow down whenever there's flows come out of the neighborhood. And then it would combine with flows from the south coming from Minnehaha Creek, which would also be renaturalized. A lot more riparian wetland habitat, more biological diversity, and it would make its way out. And now what that would do is it would allow the water surface to pile up any way it wants to. So if it's dry, drought, we're down to 811. If it's moderately wet, it's 813. If it gets even wetter, it's 814, it's 815. It can go as high or as low as it wants. It's going up and down like a natural system, and it's exiting the property. And on the other side of that berm, you've got Lake Hiawatha, and we would just basically have a tow drain system that would connect the lake with this upland area here, and we would maintain a low pumping rate because we're not trying to push water up there anymore. We're just keeping it in the natural condition, and we would just lift that water out of the tow drain and into this creek, and it flows. So that way the creek stays fresh, it doesn't get stagnant. You've always got flow coming from the north, you've got flow coming from the south, you've got a beautiful natural system. In this case, the beach would get relocated over to here. You'd have walking trails, bird watching, hiking, etc. along this naturalized zone here between the lake and the creek. And you would have a lot of benefit on the project and retain the land use. Upstream of that, by the way, I know trash has been a big problem. Phosphorus has been a big problem. You've got a point of control close to roadways where you could actually inject flocculant, you could collect trash, and you could prevent it from going downstream. So here from the Bar Report again, I keep stealing a lot of content from there. 1930 through 2020, you can see the lake level at Hiawatha. In the last 30 years, it's gotten up higher and higher and higher, around 813. I'm proposing an alternative 6 that we would basically set it back down where it was in the 1970s, 60s, 50s, etc. You got a couple feet of freeboard for water to go. And so by doing so, you'd have protection of the entire site from a 100-year storm event. So if you look here, the water surface elevation, there's 2 different ways that Barr calculated what it would be. It would climb in a big storm event. So a 2-year storm event, it would go to elevation 814. In a 5-year, go to 815. In a 10-year, go to 816. Well, the burn that kind of divides these creeks has an elevation of 817. So nothing will ever damage the property. However, we're going to shave peak flows as the water surface gets up above 815. And what I mean by that is, as water's coming down in this big catastrophic event and water's pouring down into the site and headed to the Mississippi, when it rises up, we'll be able to bring a little water into the lake. The lake can then rise from 810 to 811 to 812 to 813, and we can store 150 acre-feet in the freeboard of the lake without damaging the golf course, which is 12 hours of 150 cubic feet per second. So if you look at all these Barr reports like I have, it's a lot of water for a lot of time that you can store in the lake as a secondary relief point for the water heading out to the Mississippi River. And just to point out, that amount of storage in light blue is greater than all of the volume here in green, which was previously shown on the flood maps. I think my favorite part of the project is, and I've heard that this is a man-made solution, I believe that we are going to start with man providing something that is in partnership with nature. And if you look at all these projects that the city of Minneapolis has done on the left at Minnehaha Creek, it's a beautiful improved creek situation. On the right is Mountain House Creek up in Northern California in that California Delta area. These are amazing naturalized systems, and they can be designed to have all sorts of habitat and low flow, mid flow, high flow configurations for biological diversity. So I hope you agree with me that this alternative 6 solution, if considered, would be a win on water quality and flood protection, a win on improved ecology and park uses. You'd have more dry land and more things to do on the park. And number 3, you'd protect the historical uses of the site and the existing feel. It would feel just like it does today, only improved.
Commissioner Abene.
Okay.
Is Andy still here?
Yeah. Okay. So
you want to come forward? Sure.
I think if Mr. Komor could come up.
More so than me.
So golf is a thing that when people show up to do it, there are rules that are appropriate, and that's and they know them, and they engage in that activity together, following those rules. And I have to bring this up. I do not want to bring this up, okay? But I actually am required. So my profession is licensed by a board in Minnesota. We also have licensed teachers that work here, but my profession is the same as Mr. Komor's. And in Minnesota, our rules are particular to Minnesota, and I have to say that it's very important that my fellow commissioners, please hear me on this. This is a violation of statute for us to have this presentation, and I'm glad we've had the presentation. I think we should hear the presentation, but this is violating practicing engineering without a license in Minnesota. And Mr. Komor himself said that he is not licensed here, and please listen to what I'm saying. This is a really serious thing. So any person that is deemed to be practicing professional engineering who holds out as being able to perform, or who does perform any technical professional service such as planning, design, etc., and then no person other than one licensed by this statute and by that board may use the term professional engineer. Now, why is this important? Not only is this a violation of statute, and this is a this is not just a gotcha. This is actually, Mr. Dean, I want you to hear this because I have a lot of respect for you. I really do, and I do too for you, Mr. Komor. But there are reasons why states license engineers, because engineers work in a context. They work with a land, they work with frost lines, they work with soils and geology, and we can't work beyond our ability. So although I'm licensed, for example, in the area of civil, I'm not going to do a road design. It's not my discipline, it's not my area, it's not my expertise. So I think there's a lot of enthusiasm from our friends here at Bronze that this is a good design, but I'm going to say that I disagree. This is not a good design. This is a solution, maybe, but the ability to permit this solution is the longest shot. It's bigger, it's harder to do than 2 holes in one day. So I think I just wanted to make those comments, and I hope other people will ask questions of the team, and I'm going to stop for now.
Okay.
Can I respond to that? Or
Oh, yes.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
all right. Well, Commissioner Abene, thanks for taking all my calls over the last few weeks. Appreciate all the comments. There's a lot of content right there. First of all, I read the statutes. My attorney read the statutes. I had another attorney read the statutes. I'm a volunteer right now, and just because I know a lot about water engineering doesn't mean I can't volunteer to give my opinion on something, just like everybody else did today. And it's standard practice. I don't know how much you do out of state, but it's very standard practice to engage in looking at a concept and then apply for licensure. I've already paid all my fees to the state of Minnesota, even though I might not ever see you guys again. I've paid all my fees to NCEES, which is a national organization that gives comity or reciprocity to any state as long as I just apply the paperwork. It's a common thing. It gets rubber stamped and it goes through. I never represented myself as a Minnesota engineer. And so according to my interpretation of the code, I don't know how much you've read it or your attorneys, but I have not violated anything with respect to those codes. Number 2, I just wanted to say 2 things. I'd love to hear all the comments today. Flooding. I just want everybody to understand there's so many people that live around the community. The site is going to be at elevation 813 to 814. That means the water is going to be piled up everywhere, and they're going to reduce pumping or stop pumping, and they would have to install wells all over the place. In our solution, we'd actually keep the groundwater table down where it is today, where it's been for the last decade, so you guys can stay high and dry. I think that part didn't come through. And as far as getting it permitted, in my opinion, if you look at the plan that I presented on page 9 of 15, it's the same amount of, I'm going to say, naturalization in my plan that is in the master plan. There's naturalization and changes to what's out there in the master plan. There's changes in the plan that we presented today. They're the same amount of acreage, about 30 acres. Thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Komor?
Commissioner Abene.
Mr. Komor, what's a tow drain?
A tow drain system was something that's common in the industry to basically connect, different areas of groundwater together and convey it to a central location, which happens to be a pump station. Michael Schroeder, in the last presentation, you had mentioned that was one of the things that was considered in the past through the master plan, tow drain in the neighborhoods to keep it high and dry. And in this case, we would use the tow drain strategically right where we need it, which is on the northwest corner, which is the low-lying area, and we'd connect that to the lake so that they all have a common water surface. That's where it always has been, 810.
Okay, yeah, I think you're describing basically like a drain tile type system. But I've practiced in Minnesota for 20 some years, and I've not really heard the term tow drain used here because it's not how we talk about these things. And of course, draining ground, it makes a difference when you have a frost line and things like that, how you actually deal with those things. So anyway, the other thing is the freeboard in the lake that you're talking about. What's the delta there? Is it like 1.5 feet or 2 feet that you're thinking, round numbers? If you build up the berm and you're using the lake to actually store the backwater, to store the flood water.
Just to be clear, no creek water would go into the
Oh.
lake until we go to 815, which is about a 10-year event.
Mm-hmm.
But when it does, if the water surface, which was 813 today, and it's been like that for the last 20 years, if we pull it back down to where it was in the 1970s, that's 810. So you have 3 feet of freeboard, 50 acres, about 150 acre feet.
So 3 feet of freeboard.
Yes.
So imagine then, I think to what Commissioner Menn sort of asked, is being used as a holding pond, the term you used. Basically, it's not really naturalistic at all. It's being used like a storage pond at Ridgedale Mall. It isn't going to have a habitat. The boundary edge is going to change all of the time. That would affect the beach and the use of it. The water bodies on the east side of the lake coming around, creating supposedly creating a wetland would not be a stable or natural edge to the lake at all, and also that would obstruct people accessing it. So we'd trade the access that you can't do from the backside during the summer because of the golf fencing. You'd still only get half the lake to human feet. So, and it would just be a very unpredictable and unnaturalistic edge. It wouldn't be environmentally sound at all. So.
Mind if I respond to that real quick? So here's the level of the lake. So the level of the lake actually goes, this is from the bar report, it goes from 812, 813, 811, 814, it goes up and down, up and down, up and down. It wouldn't do that anymore if it was disconnected. If it was disconnected, it would actually be held wherever we want to hold it. We could hold it at 809.5 if we wanted to. It would never change until there was a 10-year storm event, and it would fill up for a week during a 10-year event and get pulled back down again.
President Forney, yeah. So it would change with rain events. It would change with rain. It would change with the attachments from the storm drain system. So it would change all the time. It would not be a stable, naturalistic edge. The current master plan, which is compromising, it's engaged with the public, that been deeply engaged, and is trying to develop the most naturalistic set, environmental plan while maintaining actual golf. So, okay, thank you.
Commissioner Abene.
Okay, so I do think a lot is being, when you have these conversations and it gets intense. I love the passion. I do. But you kind of forget in the moment that we actually don't have any kind of viable, we're not considering anything that's viable right now. And we're also, there's a very, very good possibility that the engineer that led that discussion is not going to be licensed in Minnesota by the deadline, believe me. And so, and there are probably thousands of Minnesota registered engineers that could be engaged to do this work that understand where we are. So I would say that, again, I bring up good faith. This extension is from your hearts. I see it. There's good faith there. But I have a feeling that we're going to get close to that deadline and we're still going to be looking at about the same thing. And it's not going to be any more viable or well thought through. And especially if that part of the discussion is being led by someone that has zero experience of dealing with our permitting and our environmental milieu here in Minnesota, which is heinous and difficult. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is, this may be a defining moment, and I think there are a lot of people that bring a different type of passion that are saying, oh my gosh, we've been, asking for this nonstop and working on this in good faith. And I can't remember who it was, a speaker, it might have been Mr. Dean, who said something like, the DNR doesn't have the power to close the golf course. And that's true, the DNR doesn't. You know who does? We do. So there's a thing called RGU, Responsible Governmental Unit. We have a responsibility to steward these lands in a way that is managing them for the environmental causes and detrimental impacts that they might be producing. We have a responsibility to the environment, to the water, to the land in that location. So, I would just ask my fellow commissioners to consider the fact that we're not going to ever see anything more viable or possible, and I have a very strong feeling we're going to get a request for an extension when the time comes. So I can't vote. I actually cannot, I don't think even legally a vote for this extension, and this resolution.
Commissioner Schaefer.